NBC will have a movie on Monday in prime time, thereby giving us a movie every night of the week. That'll be 3 nights for NBC, 2 for CBS, and 2 for ABC. And I predicted that very shortly the 3 networks would petition Congress to change the week to 9 days so that each of them could have 3 nights. But to go along with that point, I believe some national group predicted that we were heading for a national nervous breakdown. The anxieties and so forth. Now, when you put on an old movie, it's possible that it'll be a movie made about some social problem, but a problem that was contemporary 6, 7, 10, 15 years, 20 years ago. And that makes it safe.
Oh, no question.
And again, this is the kind of programming that television, national television seems to be, this escapist type.
Mm-hmm. It's reminiscent of television in its early days, when indeed there was certainly a race problem in those days. It wasn't out in the street. It wasn't loud in our ears. It wasn't infesting our gut, our conscious gut as it is today. But by God, there was anguish amongst minorities then as there is now.
I remember that play you wrote, A Town Turned to Dust.
Oh, yeah, which, well, you see, then you assaulted the straw men who were acceptable as minority groups. Mexicans, American Indians, Eskimos, beaten down, downtrodden peasants under the Tsar. These were the minorities, but not the Negro. Now, consequently, I think the purpose, the point of a dramatic show, which is used as a vehicle of social criticism, is to involve an audience, to show them wherein their guilt lies, or at least, indeed, their association. But when you're talking about a bunch of cavalrymen knocking off a bunch of poor redskins and putting them into a reservation, the audience need to have no association, certainly no guilt. How many Indians have they pushed into a reservation? But if indeed you talk about a denial of a man putting his garbage can next to yours, whether he's fought in Vietnam or wherever, by virtue of his color, now you're getting into a universal guilt, which they should feel, or at least in part understand.
You can extend that and dilate around a very important word.
By a long shot. I'm not suggesting that we suddenly develop a gigantic school of protest here, or of social comment, in which we preoccupy ourselves with commentative drama, this sort of thing. But I do believe the nature of the times now demand that television takes positions, that it exposes both sides of controversy. I've yet, for example, I keep thinking this awful thing, not to inject a political note into this, but I have a feeling we're dealing with a faceless enemy in terms of the Vietnamese. At least when Jack Warner ran Warner Brothers, I knew what a Japanese soldier looked like, albeit a cartoon version. He had gigantic teeth and myopic vision, and he ran around assaulting nuns and torturing Clark Gable. And indeed, the Nazi was the unregenerative animal with a whip. And he pointed with the whip for these 1,000 to go into that gas chamber and so and so. Now television gives us Hogan's Heroes. And next year, I suppose it'll be the Merry Men of Auschwitz.
Yes.
And a big a dance thing on the Death March of Bataan.
Yeah, ballet maybe.
A ballet of that sort. You see, I think this is a distortion. Now, when we're talking about, if indeed they want to have the temerity to suggest what is a moment in American history or world history, do it properly.
But you know, one thing,
you may have to tell them a story of prejudice in parable form, in which they may step aside as third persons and cluck and say, how awful we treat our minority groups. But at least they know that it's an evil, and they will recognize it as such. And by osmosis or some incredible process, will somewhere along the line be faced with a situation in which they too may have to exercise a prejudice and be conscious of it as an evil. Now, on Twilight Zone, for example, done during just as timorous a time as any other time, we made a comment on prejudice, on conformity, on intolerance, on censorship. But it's easy to do it when you're talking about Buck Rogers isn't allowed to write his memoirs in the way he wants to write them.
Yes.
So he puts on his backpack, his rocket pack, and he zooms over to the publisher. And they applaud and laugh and think how exciting and interesting. Now, it may well be that the inner message may never get through, but I think peripherally it does get through.
I myself am not